Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stay Hungry podcast. Today, we're talking about the power of the podcast. And I should say, we've got a very special guest. Paige, welcome to the Stay Hungry podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, I guess for the listeners, do you want to explain how we know each other?
Sure. I became a virtual assistant about 3 years ago, and I kind of found a niche with booking guests on podcasts as a part of their advertising marketing campaigns. And it's been really successful for some of my clients. And during that journey, I found your show and I've been offering some guests to you, and it's been working out wonderfully. So, this has been an awesome partnership.
Yeah. You've sent some really cool guests our way, so that's been exciting. So how did you find our show?
I think it was just through a Google search. I had a couple of marketing clients that were interested in being on marketing shows, and I do a lot of research when I'm building their lists. And just through outreach, I reached out to you guys, and you were like, "Yeah, let's do it." So
That's awesome. I remember Chris Thomas was one of the early guests, and
yes.
our podcast went from reasonably successful to insane after we had him on the show. And yeah, that was like, okay, this is pretty serious now. So, so what brings you here?
Um, so I am a virtual assistant. I was working with a agency. They would find me leads and I would work with those clients. And I recently broke off and I'm doing my own thing now. So just trying to chat, learn, get exposure, do all the things. So you were kind enough to ask me to be here today. And I was like, let's do it. Cause like we mentioned, I feel like I know you after all this
Yeah,
time,
yeah, and
working through email.
we owe you one as well. That's where I am with it. And so like saying that, like, it feels like we know each other. One of the things you did when we launched our book, you took our book on holiday with you, and you posted a really nice picture of it in a sunny scene, and that blew up too. That was like, wow, their books in the tropics. It was yeah, that was awesome. So yeah, I'm very grateful. I thought I'd give that a shout out whilst we're here.
Yeah, it was I was heading out on vacation with some girlfriends and I knew kind of the flight was going to be a couple hours. So I'm always trying to take what little downtime I have between being a business owner and being a mom and learn something new. And I
Mm.
was like, if these guys are putting out a book, I have to get it and I have to hear what they have to say. So I read it on my flight there. I read it on my flight back. I've read it a couple times since then,
No
but
way.
yeah, I love it because it's just so many good tidbits of marketing. But for people that maybe are new to marketing and can understand, like the way you break it down and the way you explain it and how it's applied is really awesome. Because if you're not, well versed in the marketing space, is definitely something that you can still read and understand and actionable steps to apply it, which is phenomenal. So it's a great tool.
Yeah, that was the plan all along, even for kind of business owners of relatively big businesses. They don't want all the terminology. They don't want all the mystique of marketing. They just want somebody to cut through the bullshit and tell them what it is. And we exposed ourselves by doing that to an extent, but that's the point. It's like, well, yeah, there's no secrets. This is what we do. If you've got the inclination, the time, and the energy to do it yourself, good for you. Go and do it. If you haven't, come and speak to us. And that's
Exactly. And I'm kind of old school where I love a book. I love to hold it. I love to highlight. I like to write notes. And it's just something about it where I can just pick it up when I have time and read about it instead of like, oh, you have to be on this webinar at a
yeah,
certain time and there's a bunch of people and you can't ask questions or whatever. I love just grabbing a book and reading it. So that was for
nice.
me. That was awesome.
Okay, so I can get you on this now. Chapter one is all about niching, and
Mhm.
you've just gone solo. What's your niche?
So I'm a podcast person. So I am booking people on shows. I'm helping with doing social media for shows. I have a partner, he does the editing, and then I'll do like audiograms and show notes and that sort of thing. And I I work with another virtual assistant. She's a good friend of mine, and she likes to do the admin and calendar and bookkeeping, but I'm more of like a creative. So I love doing the podcast stuff, and I love doing the social media stuff where I can have a creative outlet and, design and do stuff like that. So, and there's a lot of need for that, I feel like,
Yeah,
as well, because people, um, they know podcasts are awesome. They know it's good exposure, but some of them don't realize, like, they wake up one day and they're like, I want to have a podcast, but how much work goes into a podcast between
yeah,
the editing and getting the show out there and the show notes and tagging people and making sure, it's out on time and the schedule. I mean, there's just like a lot that goes into it. So,
yeah, and just kind of how much you need to have in the bag all the time, because you never know when a recording might get cancelled, or somebody will be ill, or something happens at work. And
yeah.
like, I think we're 2.5 months ahead on our output now, which is great. Probably the best position we've ever been in. But it's a big
Yeah.
thing. So what's made you so passionate about podcasts?
I just think I've seen so much success with my clients that do it. If they can put aside the 30 minutes to an hour and have that conversation, it is so rewarding, and they've seen so much success from it,
Uh,
rather than doing some other kind of marketing campaigns. Outside of spending that hour on your time and paying me a little to find you podcasts and bookings, I mean, it's really a great investment, and you can repurpose the content over and over. You can you build that relationship, you meet new audiences. So I just find it to be like very rewarding for my clients. They love it. They really enjoy that conversation too. And I've just seen a lot of positivity come from it. So
yeah, and it's evergreen. I think that, like, from a
yeah.
marketing standpoint, it's there forever. So
Yeah.
I had a meeting last week with somebody, and they raised a point that came up in our podcast 2 years ago, and I had no idea what they were talking about. But that, which isn't great, but they still came for the meeting. So it was, yeah,
Yeah.
it can be a really powerful tool. And you know, particularly if you're in business terms, if everything you say you stand by, if you're someone who runs your business by your values, if you have core values and a set of ethics, it's not going to hurt you that there's material out there for years and years and years. It's a really powerful tool that kind of does it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just repurposing it over and over,
Yeah,
like taking that podcast from 2 years ago, as long as it still applies and you still stand by it, you can make audiograms, you can put it out on social media again, you can reference it. So yeah, there's a lot of bang for your buck for doing a, 1 hour podcast episode for sure.
yeah, definitely. So what's next for you? What does business look like now?
So I'm always thinking about what's next, because I'm just an entrepreneur at heart, and I love helping business owners. I love a small business. So what I've done recently is I've worked with my friend. She's another virtual assistant, and we've come up with a guide that we're selling for anyone that's interested in becoming a virtual assistant. So it's like 3 booklets, and the first booklet is how to prepare yourself to become a virtual assistant, what that looks like, kind of a day in the life, and just something that somebody can read over to make sure it's a good fit for them. The other booklet is about how to get your first client, networking, how to prepare for your first phone call, questions to ask, notes to take. And then the last one is setting up your business. So are you going to have a website? Are you going to set up a business entity? How are people going to contact you? All of the things that people need to know when starting a business if they've never done it before, and to have confidence to take that first step. I think that was something that I worked with an agency for a really long time, just because I didn't know if I could do it. And I didn't have that resource that I would have to do all the research on my own to figure out what the heck I was doing, because I've never started a business before. But with these booklets, you get a lot of that base information to go off of, and it's a really good starting point. And then you can move forward having that confidence, like, yes, I know what I need to do. I know how to approach a client. I know how to get started, find my niche. What services am I going to offer? How am I going to bill them? It's just all of the things that we've learned. I've had over 65 clients in the past 3 years. So it's all my lessons and my mistakes and my secrets, in these booklets. So they can get started. There's a lot of people that want to make a change, stay-at-home moms. That's how I got started. Even if they just want to do it for like a side hustle, they have their regular job, and then at night they just want to have a couple social media clients or do something like that. It gives them the opportunity to kind of get started. So
Nice. So how are people going to be able to get hold of these?
So if you go to my website, paigeonlineva.com, there's a link there where you can purchase it. We're also going to, in the new year, we're going to offer a subscription to ask us any questions. We're going to do live Q&As. You can meet other virtual assistants. I think that's a really big piece of it too, because when you work remotely, you can kind of feel like you're on an island a little bit. And if you have questions, you don't really know who to go to. So that's going to be really affordable. It's going to be like $3.99 a month to have access to tools and resources and ask your questions. So we're really excited.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So back to the topic at hand, podcasts. When you get a new client and they are exploring podcasts for the first time, how do you brief them in terms of what to expect, what's going to happen?
Yeah. So when I was with the agency, I did podcast coaching services. So I basically did a Zoom call like we're doing right now, and I broke down how to be prepared for the interview.
Yeah.
So I like for them to have at least 3 stories that tie to a lesson, that tie to a call to action. So the story is important because it builds that connection with the audience. Like, I was struggling, but I got through it. The lesson and the overall thing that I learned that I want you to learn from this is to do X, Y, and Z. And if you need help with that, here's my website to continue the conversation. So I like them to have 3, sometimes 5, because they might be on a wide range of categories for podcasts. If some might be business, some might be real estate, some might be a working dad, and not all the stories are going to apply. So having that as like, not necessarily a script, but to be prepared, to answer questions and to have that call to action is important, because sometimes you get on a call and you just start talking, and all of a sudden the conversation has moved to something completely different. And then the show is over and you're like, I didn't even get to talk about, the lesson or do my call to action or anything, and it's over, so making the most of your time when you're on that show is really a big part of the coaching and being prepared for the interview.
Yeah. I think that, ultimately this is storytelling. That's as is all marketing. But I think, our worst guests, which have not come from you, just to be clear, they don't even know what's about to happen. They come on the podcast, and I think in their minds they have kind of ideas about radio interviews, or maybe they're hoping that they can ask me questions, and then they come on the podcast and I'm like, okay, so who are you and why do people care? and they help me, help. Where actually, like we've just done, I haven't sent you questions beforehand. There's no script to this. We're just having a natural conversation about why you do what you do and how you are an authority to help people with that. And I think if you can nail that, it doesn't matter whether you're going into a podcast, into an interview, into speaking on stage, a networking environment. If you can nail that, like you said, 3 stories that all link to the same call to action, that'll set you up for life.
Yep. Yeah. What I also like to do for clients that haven't been on a show before, or even ones that have, I will send them, once I get a booking, solidified in their calendar, the night before, a couple of nights before, I will send them the name of the show, the name of the host's LinkedIn or bio, if I have it, the last 3 episodes, and I encourage them to listen to it to understand the flow and how the conversation is presented. The summary of the podcast, so that they can hopefully review that and get set up, to know, be prepared, because some hosts don't send over questions and it is very casual, but that could be a little nerve-wracking as well for the guests. So I like to make sure that they have everything they need to go in with confidence and be able to have that conversation and have it be, like productive, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I completely relate to that. We've had some guests that desperately want us to send them questions beforehand, and then we have some guests who that's the worst thing ever because it turns them into a robot and they don't want to come across robotic. And so I don't wing it, but I'm pretty much winging it. It's like I'm used to what I ask, I'm used to the flow, and I want it to be kind of a bit spontaneous. I want people to show their personalities. I don't want to hear their pre-recorded script. And it's interesting, like you were saying about reading our book on the flight and then you read it on the flight back. I'd have never have got that out of you if you knew that question was coming. And so what's your favorite outcome from a podcast client so far?
Just the building of the relationships and the connections that they make, and they become almost like friends with the hosts. I just love that. And I'm all about, small business and connections and building that community and that network. And so if they can have a conversation like we're having and continue that relationship, to me, that's a huge win. Yes, getting them booked on the podcast is great, but let's continue on from that hour, let's partner together. Let's have another conversation. Let me, send this out to my email list and get you some, recognition, and send more people to your page. Like, let's just build on this. And that's really rewarding for my clients, for me to see, because that's just what I want to do. I want to send them more people, more community, more sales, so that's what's really been rewarding.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think, you're essentially working in marketing. You call yourself a virtual assistant, but I think you might actually be a freelance marketer, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
But relationship building is what it's all about. As a host, I'm trying to build a relationship with my guest. I'm trying to build a relationship with my audience. I'm trying to build a relationship with my audience's audience. I'm trying to build a relationship with my guest's audience. It's all those things. And then off the back of that, near enough, and this is the power of a podcast, every episode, somebody at some point will reference it to me. It might be someone I don't know. It might be someone I know really well. It might be the guests themselves. It might be an existing client. But suddenly you've got all those touch points from 30 minutes of audio that with other forms of marketing would take you years to achieve.
Yeah, one thing I love about a podcast is how flexible it is to listen to for an audience. You can put it on in the car, you can put it on. I love like just putting my headphones in and taking my dog for a walk and listening to a
Yeah,
show and learning something instead of, having to read it myself necessarily. I do like books too, but if I'm on the go, I just like to put it on in my car, and if I have a long drive, listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook or something like that. I'm always like learning because as you know, in marketing, it's always
shift.
moving and
Yeah,
shifting and improving and changing. And so if you're not staying on top of it, like you're going to be left behind.
yeah. That's
So,
it. So sometimes things change day to day, let alone month to month. And podcasts are a brilliant way to just constantly be consuming something without it interrupting your day. Although I did read something the other day. I opened a book to read at the weekend, and the first page said, because you've bought this book, you can have the audio book for 99 cents. And we advise that you listen to the audio book at the same time as reading it, and you'll absorb it much quicker.
wow.
And I was like, that's cool. That's a cool tip.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
it prompted me that I need to make an audiobook of my own book, if that's true.
Yeah, that would be the next step is
yeah, it's one of those sort of on the to-do list things that definitely needs to happen. I just worry about, I'm like this rural English guy. Is this the voice of the audiobook? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I think it is. Be authentic as possible. I
yeah,
love it.
sure. Yeah. So what kind of guests, what kind of clients are you working with right now?
I do a lot with real estate. So real estate investors, realtors, real estate agents. That's like a huge space for podcasts that I have found. And then anyone in like coaching, there's a ton of coaching podcasts out there. So if it's self-improvement coaching, business coaching, I just had an Enneagram client, she helps people with productivity, stuff like that. So
I
those two.
think her episode might have gone out on our podcast today.
Yeah, Aaron, yes. So those are kind of the two spaces that I'm in. Coaching and real estate have been really successful. So
Sure, that reminds me, coaching wise, I need to send you an email. Probably not for the podcast, but
okay.
yeah, I know someone you need to get in touch with. So that's cool.
Okay.
Right. So how does someone who maybe is brilliant at what they do, but never talked about it before, so how do they go from meeting you to being a guest on a podcast that's listened to all over the world? Because that's kind of like when someone first sticks a camera in your face and they're like, record a video, and you're like, what? How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, so I can definitely relate because I'm nobody, but I hate talking about myself. I can talk about being a virtual assistant. I can talk about all the other things, but talking about myself, I'm like, you don't want to hear it. It's nothing great. But so I understand that, and that's why I do these like 2-hour coaching calls, and I just dig with them and like, what is your biggest lesson in life? What are the things that just asking those questions and kind of prying them open a little bit to and if they start with me, if they start just having a conversation with me and I can get it down on paper for them and almost just ask them to practice it a little bit, like pitching it and talking about themselves, talking about their story, that's why I offer the coaching, because some people don't do that. They're just brilliant, they have their own business, they're just working away, but as far as like pitching or talking about themselves, it's not something they do every day. So they do need a little bit of help opening up. And then how are you relating those stories to what you're doing with business and how you got here and why other people can do that too? So it just takes a couple of calls, couple of good questions, couple of brainstorming sessions, and they do a couple of shows and they kind of practice it a little bit, understand the flow, understand what they want to talk about, and it just starts to come natural. But it's like anything else, you've got to practice the conversation a little bit. You've got to know what you're talking about. And if podcasting is definitely something that you want to do, you've got to do a couple of them. You're not going to see results after doing just one show. You want to get in the groove of it. You want to meet more people. It's kind of like networking, So, yeah, just having those coaching calls and really kind of diving into their lessons, their experiences, their mistakes, and really forming that into a conversation for them. And then they feel comfortable.
I love that. That's cool. I think networking is a really good way to describe it. It's like networking without the hassle.
Yes.
It's so you're going to reach a lot more people. They've already tuned in because they're interested in what you've got to say. Mm-hmm. And then all they're asking you to do is talk about why they should listen to you. And mm-hmm. that's when you get that in your head, that it suddenly becomes a much more peaceful place to be. You're like, okay, I can do this. So speaking of prying people open, what's your motivation? Why do you do what you do? What's the reason? If somebody's listening right now, why should they work with you?
Like I mentioned, I have an entrepreneurial spirit. So I'm always thinking about ways businesses can be better. They can stay on top of stuff. They can make more sales. And for me, seeing a business owner successful and being like helping them get there, helping them reach that next milestone in their business and their career, it's just so rewarding to me because I'm doing the same thing. So I know the joy I feel and the excitement I feel when I get a new client, when I book them on a podcast, when I make that sale, when I help them reach their goals. Like, I don't know. It's just something that's like in my blood. I'm kind of a little bit competitive with myself too. So I'm like, we've got to do the best and we've got to be the best. And so I want to share that drive with other entrepreneurs and I want that help them reach their goals. And if I can be a little part of that or a little part of their everyday or make it easier for them, give them more time, like that's what drives me. I love it. I love it. And it's, most of the stuff I do, it's not brain surgery, it's very simple. Check your calendar, check your inbox, book you on podcasts. But without those small things, business owners can really fall behind, and they can really, those little things on a day-to-day basis can really lead to a bigger sale, having more time, reaching more clients, building more relationships for them. And so I see the benefit in having an assistant, having help, and a lot of business owners, sometimes they know that they need it, but they don't really ask for it or they don't see the benefit. But once they do, it's like, they're like, wow, I should have done this sooner, and I'm like, yes, I'm being helpful, so I love it.
Yeah, that's the best feedback for sure. And I think like as a business owner myself, you're so used to doing everything by yourself that the biggest barrier to overcome is getting somebody else to do it to the standard that you want it done to. Yeah. And then when they show that they can, that's the best feeling ever because you suddenly feel like you've got half of your life back. So
yeah, and some business owners are they don't, they've been just doing everything, like you said, by themselves for so long that delegating can be hard, communicating can be hard. And so as a virtual assistant, I'm not sitting in the desk next to them. So I have to set up a weekly call. Let's run through your to-do list. What can you give me? I can absolutely take that on, like give that to me so you can focus on other things. So there is, sometimes I have to teach business owners, like, you can release that to me, give it to me one time. Let me show you what I can do. And then we can move forward that way. So there's a little bit of coaching in there too, setting them up with a good way to communicate, setting them up with how to delegate, what that looks like, deadlines and meeting all of that. So there's a little bit that goes into that as well.
Yeah. So how does your next client get in touch?
I have, they can send me an email, paigeonlineva@gmail.com, or visit my website, paigeonlineva. .com. So that would be great.
Cool. Paige, you've been an awesome guest. Thanks so much for coming on the Stay Hungry podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm going to share this with all my fans.
Better make sure I send you the recording. Nice one.